prize, the International Criminal Court Moot Court Competition 2016 English version is now in session. Please be seated.
Now, according to the rules of the ICC Moot Court Competition, deliberations that we've just had were made to assess each of the teams participating based upon the following criteria. Firstly, organisation, structure and analysis of the issues. Secondly, the use of facts and legal principles. Thirdly, the use of authorities and citations. Fourthly, persuasiveness, ingenuity, logic and reasoning. And fifth, overall presentation. And I will ask each of my colleagues in a moment to make comments about each of the teams, but I have to say this has been a remarkably difficult task because of the extraordinarily high standards demonstrated by all three participating teams. And I would add that having been a judge in one form or another for over 2 decades, all of the participating teams demonstrated an ability in presentation which exceeded many of the professional advocates that I've had before me over the years in a number of different institutions. So you can see why I say it's been a remarkably difficult task, and at the end of the day, the difference between the parties was very small, and everybody was at the very top end of the scoring matrix. With regard to the government's team, I'm going to ask my colleague Philip Anbach to make a few comments.
Thanks, Judge. Yeah, let me just tune in with Judge Morrison that it was really, really rewarding to listen to all of you. And now, in particular, with regard to the government team, and I have to say that I think you had a tough ride with regard to the state-like entity argument, because I think that this was something that was difficult to bring along. You did a very good job there. So this I think was in terms of the presentation something tough. As a little point, obviously, in cases where you could imagine that the questioning continues, one could throw in and to say then, for instance, and if one were to consider the crimes, one could have then, for instance, said why there is no enslavement, why there is no other crime against humanity. Having said that, continuing with other arguments that were made, I was impressed by the territorial argument, Article 12 versus Article 30, in terms of the terminology there. I think that's a very good point. And in particular, the rebuttal. As it is so often for the first party to speak, they don't know on which points the others are going to attack them. So the rebuttal is always a very important moment where one can set the record straight, so to speak, on your behalf. And I think the entire bench was very impressed by how you managed to really bring a lot of clarifying points in a very clear and concise manner in your 10 minutes, and addressed a lot of different points that were raised in the meantime. So I think really it was a pleasure to listen to you on this. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Power, who will deal with the prosecution team in terms of commentary.
I'd just like to echo Judge Morrison and Philip's words in relation to all the teams. You were all extremely impressive and convincing in your deliveries. In relation to the prosecution team in particular, we found your presentation to be extremely convincing. It was very well delivered. It was very focused and clear, easy to follow. You made excellent reference to jurisprudence, both of the court and of other legal authorities, in particular in relation to the disqualification question and the organisational policy. You demonstrated an excellent understanding of the subject matter, going much beyond the issues that were dealt with by the proposed case. You demonstrated that you had a much wider understanding of the legal principles that might be relevant. In terms of the structure, one thing that was a little bit maybe could be improved is that some of the jurisprudence that was most relevant was only mentioned later in the rebuttal. And in one particular instance, this question of how long-term the damage to the environment must be, it was quite unusual that that was only raised during the rebuttal and not in your main presentation. But overall, as I said, we found your presentation to be extremely convincing and very impressive, and I would like to congratulate you on your performance.
Thank you, and I now turn to the victims' representative team. You in fact, in many ways have a very difficult task, because advocacy for victims is a relatively new field of advocacy because of the structure of the Rome Statute and the innovative role given to victims and their representatives in court. So it's a field of advocacy which few people will have ever embarked upon, and you're not dealing with culpability but of consequence, which makes it slightly more difficult, I think, to formulate arguments. But having said that, you approach the task with some brilliance, if I may say so, and it was a very interesting lesson. Some of your initial observations, I wondered where we were going, and then I found myself agreeing with you. So that is the art of advocacy. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Power, again, who will announce the second runner-up.
The second runner-up is the team for the prosecution.
And that team is now invited to step forward to receive the award, which will be presented to them by Mary Ann Power, and a photograph will be taken, and we offer our congratulations to the entire team. I now give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Ambach, who will announce the first runner-up.
And the first runner-up is the government team.
Now, those of you versed in deductive logic will know what I'm going to say next. The winner of the ICC moot competition of 2016, English edition, the representatives of the victims. That is, however, not the end of the proceedings, and as I've said, it was an extraordinarily close-run thing. But we now have to deal with who was the best individual oralist in the competition, and I'm pleased to announce that the best oralist in the entire competition is an award given to Counsel for the Government. I again want to congratulate all of you on your excellent work and deep knowledge of the ICC and the Rome Statute system. There isn't one of you, I anticipate, who will not, if they chose to, make a career in international law, find themselves rising to the very top. This has been an extraordinarily high standard all round. We see lawyers of every manner, shape or form before the courts, and I can say what I've just said with complete confidence. I'm happy now to invite all of you to the reception in the lounge area of the conference centre, conference cluster as it's known, and the ICC protocol staff are ready to escort you to that conference cluster for the court where we will meet again. The moot court appeals hearing regarding the situation in Porvos is now closed.
All rise.